A man who was once an elite Navy veteran after being discharged resolutely became a top assassin in the underworld. However, in a failed assassination attempt, he not only turned against the gang boss, but also had to confront a female police officer who was also his sworn enemy. Because of this, he even had to kill his own protege. How deep was this grudge that made the man willing to risk his life to wipe out an entire criminal organization? The story begins 3 days earlier. That day, Gabriel was commemorating his deceased wife when he suddenly received an urgent call from gang boss Nord. The Duifang expressed deep regret, saying he didn't mean to disturb him on his wife's death anniversary, but the situation was so critical that he had to ask Gabriel to meet. It turned out that the gang had an important transaction coming up. Nord feared that his sworn enemy, Lewis, would cause trouble, so he wanted Gabriel to act first to avoid any complications that might affect the entire plan. However, even though his hands were stained with blood, Gabriel was an assassin with principles. He never took action on his wife's death anniversary, so after Nord left, Gabriel immediately called his protege, Carlos, asking him to handle the mission with Louis. Carlos, though young, was highly experienced. He entered an apartment building, placed a bag containing weapons wrapped in newspaper right in front of the door, and then knocked on a room. 2 bodyguards immediately stopped him for a search. Although Carlos said he was there to talk business, Luis was clearly wary of him. Only when the bodyguard confirmed he wasn't carrying anything dangerous did Luis signal Carlos to sit down. However, the conversation did not go smoothly. Louis was arrogant, believing that Nord would surely fail this time, and intentionally provoked and stirred up the relationship between Carlos and the gang. It was clear that the negotiation could no longer continue. Carlos calmly stood up, walked to the door, quickly drew the gun he had hidden, and in a flash, took down the 2 bodyguards. He then skillfully dodged the bullets Louis fired and quickly raised his gun to finish him off. At the same time, 2 police officers, Leo and Sophie, were on duty outside. They chatted cheerfully, unaware of the upheaval inside. Suddenly, Carlos's silhouette appeared at the door. Leo immediately became alert, grabbing his binoculars to observe. He saw Carlos retrieve a bag from the car and then return to Luis's apartment. It turned out that inside the bag was a timed bomb. Carlos placed it on the table and quickly left the scene. However, this unusual action made Sophie wary. She was about to get out of the car to investigate when Carlos suddenly spotted them and took a picture with his phone. Just a second later, a loud explosion rang out. Fortunately, due to the considerable distance, Leo and Sophie were not seriously injured. However, as they were reviewing the aftermath of the explosion, 2 senior agents unexpectedly arrived. They criticized the 2 for their inefficiency. Luis's case had been assigned to them long ago, but there had been no progress. The target was even killed right before their eyes. Their superiors had lost patience and decided to hand the case over to 2 senior agents, Dai and another. Meanwhile, Carlos and Gabriel had returned to Nord's mansion and reported the mission results. Upon learning that Carlos's whereabouts had been discovered by 2 police officers, Nord, known for his caution, immediately ordered Gabriel to eliminate the 2 officers to remove any future threats. Since this was caused by his protege, Gabriel reluctantly agreed to clean up this mess. After leaving the mansion, Gabriel asked Carlos to quickly investigate the addresses of the 2 police officers and inform him so they could handle it together. At the same time, Sophie was still unaware of the danger she was in. She was venting her anger and dissatisfaction. Leo advised her to learn to control herself, otherwise, she would eventually make a big mistake. But Sophie said she couldn't change. Past events made her unable to control her murderous intent. A moment later, Carlos found Leo's address. This man was in his 50s and lived alone. Hearing this, Gabriel immediately signaled Carlos to act. He pulled 2 suitcases and knocked on Leo's door. Seeing an unfamiliar man at the door, Leo immediately became alert, preparing to tell him to leave. A second after confirming the target was dead, Gabriel and Carlos quickly dismembered Leo's body into several pieces and carefully wiped the bloodstains on the floor. After everything was done, they carried the 2 suitcases containing the body, drove to a deserted area, found a hole, and buried the 2 suitcases. All traces of Leo's existence were erased. Because the mission was too smooth, Carlos began to lower his guard and became arrogant. He thought that dealing with the remaining police officer would not take much effort, so he told his master Gabriel to go home and rest first, while he would handle the other target alone. Reluctantly, Gabriel nodded in agreement but did not forget to remind him to be a little more careful. Returning home, Gabriel looked at the photo of his deceased wife, and the longing in his heart became more uncontrollable. He was too tired of this life of constant danger, but retiring was not so easy. At the same time, Carlos received a message from a corrupt police officer. After learning Sophie's address, he immediately asked this officer to lead the way, using the cover of night to approach Sophie's house. However, the noise they made woke Sophie. She, who was already sleeping uneasily, immediately grabbed her gun, rolled off the bed, and listened alertly to every movement around her. A moment later, a corrupt police officer holding a gun rushed into the living room. Sophie was prepared. She immediately pulled the trigger and the opponent fell to the ground, dying instantly. The others, seeing their accomplice fail, immediately changed tactics. One fired a shotgun at Sophie, trying to suppress her with firepower. The other intended to flank her from behind. Under the intense barrage of bullets, Sophie was forced to retreat temporarily. She quickly ran out of the house, opened the trunk of the police car, and took out a rifle. Unexpectedly, just as she picked up the gun, the assassin from inside the house chased her out. But at this moment, Sophie was horrified to discover that the assassin lying on the ground was her colleague, Yo. Before she could ask why, Carlos suddenly shot Yo through the heart from behind, killing him on the spot. Seeing this, Sophie was both frightened and enraged, but in the unfavorable situation she panicked, got into a car and sped away from the scene. Carlos repeatedly pulled the trigger, but in the end, he could not take her down. Thus, Carlos not only completed the mission assigned by Nord, but also suffered a serious injury to his arm. He called Gabriel to report the situation. He immediately realized something was wrong, but Carlos was his protege after all. He had to act again to resolve this mess. As soon as he learned of the failed assassination of Sophie, Nord immediately became furious. This matter delayed his business. So, right in front of Gabriel, he threatened to kill Carlos for his inefficiency. Unexpectedly, Gabriel's expression suddenly turned cold. He then calmly assured Nord that he would handle this himself. Trusting him, Nord finally decided to spare Carlos. As long as Sophie was dealt with, everything would be fine. However, neither of them expected that what happened next would be much more complicated than they imagined. After escaping death, Sophie immediately sought out D, the partner of the corrupt police officer Zed. She angrily questioned him if he knew why Joe had come to assassinate her. But D said he knew absolutely nothing. He then used the arrest warrant to threaten Sophie, saying that they might as well both go to jail to prove their innocence. Although she didn't trust D, Sophie didn't dare to stay in the city center for long without evidence. She rushed off to find other clues. Unexpectedly, after she left, Di called Carlos. He said that Sophie had started to suspect and that he had to withdraw from the plan. But Carlos just found it amusing. A corrupt police officer daring to talk about justice. He then threatened Dali to find Sophie's hiding place, and he would handle the aftermath himself. In another development, Sophie anxiously went to Leo's house. Everything in the house seemed no different from before, but the bullet holes on the door caught her attention. Sophie quickly took out a UV light and shone it on the wall next to the door. As a result, she found clear traces of blood that had been wiped clean. Sophie's heart sank. She immediately realized that something bad had happened to Leo. She then went to the boxing gym and met Oman, who was also her coach. As a reliable colleague, she asked him to investigate Carlos's detailed information. They were very surprised to learn that Carlos had served in the military and was an experienced marksman. But after being discharged, he went astray and joined the Underworld, becoming a professional assassin thanks to his excellent skills. After reviewing the entire file, Oman advised Sophie not to confront him directly. Based on her current strength, Sophie had no chance of winning. It was best to hide for a while to avoid the storm. At the same time, Gabriel also secretly investigated Sophie's background. The results also greatly surprised him. She was not only fluent in 7 languages, but also proficient in using many types of weapons, and her combat ability even surpassed ordinary people. Clearly, she was not an ordinary police officer. Another unexpected coincidence was that her birthday coincided with the birthday of Gabriel's deceased wife. Even the necklaces they wore were identical. This reminded Gabriel of his past. He was once a Special Forces soldier. Years ago, while participating in the White Elephant Protection Movement, he met and fell in love with his deceased wife. After being discharged to make a living, he was forced to embark on the path of an assassin. When his wife was alive, she always opposed this work of his. However, just as Gabriel was about to retire, his wife passed away from cancer. Many years of living as an assassin had made Gabriel extremely tired. That is why he put all his heart into training Carlos. He hoped that he could soon replace him. Looking at Sophie, who had too many coincidences with his deceased wife, Gabriel suddenly felt confused. He seemed unable to kill her. Meanwhile, Sophie, pursued by Carlos, had nowhere to go, so she took up arms and hid in a motel. She wanted to call for help from her colleagues at the police station, but unexpectedly, they told her to return and surrender. Sophie angrily hung up, unaware that her location was also revealed because of this. Nord was having dinner with his wife. Just after ordering, 2 assassins rushed in, pointing guns. Upon learning that the gang boss was in trouble, Gabriel immediately drove to the hospital. Legal advisor William had already arrived. He told Gabriel that Nord's wife, Mrs. Tommy, had died on the spot, and that this matter would certainly not be easily overlooked. But currently, the group's business had just been legalized, so he hoped Gabriel could persuade Nord not to destroy all their efforts for personal revenge. Also a man who lost his wife, Gabriel could understand Nord's pain. So he did not immediately agree to William's proposal, but entered the hospital room. He asked all his subordinates to leave, leaving only Carlos and the bodyguard who had inefficiently protected Nord. After beating the bodyguard, Gabriel told Carlos to investigate the mastermind, while he stayed alone to watch over Nord. Early the next morning, Carlos returned with clues. The 2 assassins were not professionals, and their weapons even originated from Mexico. Gabriel thought it was caused by the Colombian gang, but Nord rejected this speculation and asserted that it was definitely the Russian gang. He then angrily declared that he must take revenge. Gabriel immediately responded. He told Nord to rest assured and recover. He and Carlos would handle everything. So the 2 masters and apprentice quickly went to the Russian gang's lair. It was a seemingly ordinary restaurant. Gabriel and Carlos pushed the door open, walked through the main hall, and finally saw people. Gabriel immediately extended his arms in greeting and went straight to the point. He had something he wanted to deliver to the boss there, Rudy, the subordinate. Hearing this, without any suspicion, led them upstairs to meet the person. Gabriel told Carlos to stay downstairs while he followed the stairs to the 2nd floor. But just as he was about to approach the office, a large man eating a sausage blocked him, saying that no strangers were allowed in. Seeing him so resolute, Gabriel said he had an appointment, and taking advantage of his moment of distraction, quickly took him down. He then immediately rushed into the office and finished off Rudy, who hadn't even had time to react. The gunshots naturally panicked the henchmen downstairs, but Carlos was prepared. He quickly drew his gun and took them down. However, the large men who rushed in afterwards were very difficult to deal with. Fortunately, in a critical moment, Gabriel arrived in time to help resolve the crisis. Once they were sure that everyone in the restaurant had been eliminated, the two carried all the bodies into the kitchen, then poured gasoline and alcohol on them and burned away all traces. On the way back, Gabriel called Nord to report that the mission was completed, but Nord was not happy. Instead, he urged Gabriel to quickly deal with Sophie. Carlos, sitting in the driver's seat, finally came to a conclusion. Nord had probably gone mad. Gabriel shook his head as he clearly also noticed Nord's abnormality. He then drove alone to the funeral home to retrieve his wife's urn. No one knew what he intended to do. Even his protege Carlos couldn't reach him. Late at night, Carlos led a group of subordinates to surround the motel. Sophie, in her room, immediately became alert. She tightly gripped her gun, ready for battle. Seeing the assassins about to break down the door, Sophie immediately ran into the next room. Although she was a good shot against the enemy's powerful firepower, she gradually fell into a disadvantaged position. At this dangerous moment, a black car suddenly stopped in front of Sophie. The person who arrived was none other than Gabriel. Seeing him rescue his target again, Carlos immediately called him angrily, questioning what he was doing. But Gabriel calmly said, "I've done what I needed to do," and hung up. At this moment, Nord also called, asking him why he betrayed him. Gabriel did not explain immediately, but directly said that he would resign. It turned out that after dealing with Rudy, Gabriel suddenly learned a harsh truth. The killer of Nord's wife was not the Russian gang, but Nord had orchestrated everything himself. The purpose was to use Gabriel to eliminate a business rival. Sadly, Nord's wife became an innocent victim in this conspiracy. Gabriel could not tolerate this deception, so he decided to thwart Nord's next plan. He took his deceased wife's urn and went to the motel to rescue Sophie. Years ago, he could not save his wife's life. Now, he certainly could not stand by and watch the female police officer, who had so many connections to his deceased wife, be harmed. Clearly, in Gabriel's heart, Sophie had become an extension of his deceased wife. A moment later, Sophie followed Gabriel home. As soon as she entered, she noticed the photo of the woman in the frame. She was about to ask, but Gabriel raised his hand to signal her to stop. The top priority now was not conversation. After many years of working under Nord, Gabriel understood very well that Nord's methods would never forgive traitors. An unavoidable war was about to begin. However, as a top assassin, Gabriel had prepared defensive measures. This house had been reinforced and fireproofed beforehand, strong enough to withstand external attacks. Moreover, the house stored many weapons and ammunition, turning it into an ideal fortress. In another development, Nord had given Carlos his final order. He demanded that Carlos eliminate Gabriel and Sophie at all costs. Carlos hesitated slightly. He didn't want to confront his master, but Nord said that this was the best opportunity for him to succeed him. Not long after, through the surveillance screen, Gabriel discovered a crowd of assassins approaching his front door. Recalling their camaraderie, the leader, a fat man, didn't want to break their bond. He signaled Gabriel to hand over Sophie, saying that everything could still be salvaged. But his words were met with a cold gun barrel. The first wave of assassins was dealt with cleanly. However, passive defense was not Gabriel's style. So, after a peaceful night, he proposed cooperating with Sophie to launch a direct attack on Nord's mansion. She, of course, also wanted to completely resolve this grudge, but just as they were both preparing their weapons to set off, 4 cars suddenly stopped outside. Then the doorbell unexpectedly rang. The person who arrived was Carlos, whom Gabriel had wholeheartedly nurtured. He calmly said that he had asked Nord for 5 minutes to talk, so Gabriel invited him into the house. The two didn't say much, but quietly drank a friendly glass of wine. 5 minutes passed, and both simultaneously drew their guns, facing each. Other like cowboys in a Western film, preparing for a shootout to determine life or death. However, Carlos had underestimated Gabriel's strength. He was shot first, and blood immediately stained his shirt. But Carlos was still unwilling to give up, using his last bit of strength to continuously pull the trigger. However, all the bullets were dodged by Gabriel. Finally, Carlos fell powerlessly onto the sofa, slowly dying under Gabriel's sorrowful gaze. After dealing with Carlos, Gabriel quickly retreated to the second floor. He skillfully assembled a sniper rifle and aimed at the other assassins waiting outside. Sophie also attached a scope to her rifle, ready for battle. At this moment, the assassins outside had lost patience. The leader shouted, demanding Gabriel and Sophie surrender. But as the shootout became more intense, an assassin took advantage of a lull in the gunfire, ran to the door, and quickly planted a bomb. In another development, faced with the intense attack from the group of assassins, Sophie decided to hold her ground at the entrance to create an escape route for both of them. Unexpectedly, just as she passed the door, the bomb exploded. The bulletproof glass shattered, and assassins poured in from outside like a tide. The two cooperated seamlessly, quickly neutralizing the second wave of attacks. However, the danger was not over. Before they could catch their breath, the next wave of assassins arrived. This time, they brought heavy machine guns. The dark muzzles pointed directly at the second-floor window, clearly intending to kill Gabriel and Sophie at all costs. Looking at the surveillance screen, Gabriel tilted his head back and took a big gulp of strong liquor. Sophie also followed suit. The pungent liquid burned their throats, also igniting the flame of determination in both their eyes. The final battle was about to begin. Gabriel grabbed his gun and quickly walked to the second floor. He found a grenade and told Sophie to hide in the bathtub in the bathroom. That was the most fortified corner of the house, which could avoid maximum firepower. At this moment, the assassins outside pulled the trigger, and bullets rained down on the house. Gabriel immediately grabbed his gun and ran out the back door. After a fierce gunfight, Gabriel's gun also ran out of bullets. But the assassins surrounding him were also almost all eliminated. At the same time, the gunfight in the villa also gradually subsided. After taking down the subordinates, Sophie finally walked out with her gun. But even though she had witnessed many gruesome scenes, she was still shocked to see a series of bodies strewn across the ground. In another development, upon learning that all the assassins he had sent were eliminated, Nord prepared another group of professional mercenaries to deal with Gabriel and Sophie once and for all. But at that moment, a strange man suddenly rushed, and before he could react, Nord collapsed under his gun. It turned out that this person was from the Russian gang, and his purpose was to take revenge for Rudy. Finally, Gabriel handed his deceased wife's urn to Sophie, asking her to keep it safe. This was both a farewell to the past and a protection